She lost everything the day they buried her husband and promised she'd never open her heart again. But when a sick Apache girl shows up in the arms of a desperate soldier, what starts as an act of mercy quickly becomes a fight for love, identity, and survival. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. Rebecca Morgan pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders as the Arizona wind whistled through the cracks in her cabin walls. 3 years had passed since she buried her husband James, but the pain still felt as fresh as the day she'd watched them lower his pine box into the unforgiving desert soil. Never again, she whispered to herself, stoking the dying embers in the fireplace. The promise she'd made at his graveside remained unbroken. Her heart would never be given to another. Soul, outside, thunder rumbled across the darkening sky. The storm had been brewing all day, threatening to break the months-long drought that had plagued the territory. Rebecca moved to the window, watching as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. Her small ranch outside Tucson had weathered many storms, but something about this one set her nerves on edge. A sudden pounding at her door made her jump. Who could be out in such weather? Cautiously, she reached for the shotgun James had taught her to use before taking it in hand. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Please, ma'am, help us." A man's voice, desperate and strained, carried through the wooden door. Rebecca hesitated only a moment before unbolting the latch. Standing on her porch was a U.S. cavalry lieutenant, soaked to the bone, holding something wrapped in his coat. Behind him, 2 more soldiers sat atop weary horses. "Lieutenant Daniel Hayes, ma'am," he said, water streaming from his hat. "Our patrol was caught in the storm. We found—" He pulled back the edge of his coat to reveal the face of a small child, an Apache girl, no more than 5 years old, her dark eyes wide with fear. "We found her alone out there," he explained, his voice softening. "Parents likely killed in the recent skirmishes. She's burning with fever, and we can't make it back to the fort in this weather." Rebecca felt something stir in her chest, something she'd thought long dead. Without thinking, she set aside her shotgun and reached for the child. "Bring her in," she said. "Quickly now." The soldiers gratefully entered, bringing with them the smell of rain and leather. The lieutenant gently placed the child in Rebecca's arms, and the girl's fragile weight sent a pang through Rebecca's heart. How long had it been since she'd held a child? Her own dreams of motherhood had been buried alongside James. "I'll prepare something warm for her to drink," Rebecca said, laying the girl on her bed. "You men can dry yourselves by the fire." As Rebecca steeped herbs for a fever tea, Lieutenant Hayes explained how they'd found the girl wandering alone near a burned-out Apache camp. The fighting between settlers and natives had intensified in recent months, leaving countless casualties on both sides. "We couldn't just leave her," he said, warming his hands by the fire. "But the fort's no place for an Apache child. The commander would likely send her to one of those Indian schools back east." Rebecca nodded silently, knowing all too well what that meant. She'd heard stories of native children torn from their culture, forbidden to speak their language or practice their traditions. The girl whimpered softly as Rebecca helped her drink the warm tea. Her dark eyes glazed with fever, fixed on Rebecca's face with a strange intensity that made Rebecca's chest tighten. "Rest now," Rebecca whispered, stroking the child's damp hair. "You're safe here." As the night deepened, the storm raged on. The soldiers slept by the fire while Rebecca kept vigil by the girl's bedside, replacing cool cloths on her forehead and whispering soothing words when nightmares made her stir. Near dawn, as the storm began to subside, the girl's fever broke. Her eyes fluttered open, clearer now, and she studied Rebecca's face in the soft light of the oil lamp. "Water," Rebecca said gently, offering a cup. The girl drank thirstily before settling back against the pillows. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, She spoke a single word that shattered the walls Rebecca had built around her heart. "Mama!" Rebecca froze, tears suddenly burning in her eyes. The girl was confused, delirious perhaps, mistaking her for someone else. But that one word, that simple, devastating word, echoed through the empty chambers of her soul. "No, little one," she managed to say. "I'm not your mama. But I'll help you find your people." But even as she spoke the words, Rebecca felt something long dormant awakening within her. A fierce protective instinct she thought had died with her dreams of motherhood. Outside, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the cabin floor. The storm had passed, but Rebecca knew that her life would never be the same again. 3 weeks had passed since the stormy night that brought little Nijoni, as Rebecca had learned was her name, into her life. The cavalry had moved on, promising to inquire about any Apache families missing a child, but Lieutenant Hayes had seemed doubtful they'd find answers in the current climate of hostility. "You'll take good care of her, Mrs. Morgan," he'd said before departing. "I can see it in your eyes." Now, as Rebecca hung laundry in the warm morning sun, she watched Nijoni carefully arranging pebbles in the dirt nearby. The child rarely spoke, but her dark, intelligent eyes observed everything. Rebecca had managed to learn a few Apache words from an old book James had kept, enough to understand basic needs, but much remained unspoken between them. "Rebecca Morgan!" The familiar voice of Martha Stevens, her nearest neighbor at 3 miles distant, called from the road. The plump woman dismounted from her wagon with surprising agility. "I've come bearing news," and her words cut short as she spotted Nijoni. "Good heavens, is that an Indian child?" Rebecca stepped protectively toward Nijoni. "Her name is Nixoni. She's staying with me for a while." Martha's expression shifted from shock to concern. "Rebecca, have you lost your senses?" Taking in one of them after what they did to poor James. The words struck like a physical blow. Rebecca's husband had been killed in an Apache raid on a supply wagon he'd been guarding, a fact everyone in the territory knew well. "She's a child, Martha," Rebecca said quietly, placing a gentle hand on Nijoni's shoulder. 5 years old. And alone in the world. Would you have me turn her away? Martha huffed, lowering her voice. "People are talking, Rebecca. Reverend Phillips himself said it wasn't proper, a white woman raising a savage." Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks. Then perhaps Reverend Phillips should examine his Christian teachings more carefully. "Suffer the little children to come unto me," wasn't it? Martha's eyes widened at Rebecca's sharp tone. In 3 years of widowhood, she had never heard the typically mild-mannered Rebecca speak so forcefully. "Well," Martha finally said, her voice stiff with disapproval, "I came to tell you there's to be a town meeting tomorrow. They're discussing the Apache problem again. After that raid on the Wilson homestead last week, folks are scared." Rebecca felt a chill despite the warm day. "I'll be there," she said simply. After Martha departed, Rebecca knelt beside Nijoni. "Don't worry," she said softly. "You're staying right here with me." That night, as Rebecca tucked Nijoni into the small bed she'd fashioned from an old trunk, the girl suddenly gripped her hand. "Bad men come," she said in halting English words that startled Rebecca, who hadn't realized how much English the child understood. "No one's coming," Rebecca assured her. "You're safe here," Nijoni shook her head vehemently. "Bad men take children, like before." A cold understanding dawned on Rebecca. "Is that what happened to you? Bad men took you from your family?" Nijoni's eyes filled with tears. "Soldiers. Fighting. Fire." Her small hands mimicked an explosion. "Mama, hide me. Say be quiet. Then ... gun." Rebecca gathered the trembling child into her arms, her heart breaking anew. Not abandoned or orphaned, separated in chaos. Somewhere, a mother might be searching desperately for her daughter. "I'll protect you," Rebecca whispered fiercely. "I promise." The following day, Rebecca dressed in her finest though still modest dress and arranged her hair neatly beneath her bonnet. After hesitating, she decided to bring Najoni with her to the town meeting. Hiding the child would only fuel suspicions. The meeting house was packed when they arrived, and a hush fell over the crowd as Rebecca entered with Najoni's small hand clasped tightly in hers. She held her head high as she found a seat near the back, ignoring the whispers that rippled through the assembly. Mayor Thornton stood at the front, alongside Reverend Phillips and Sheriff Davis. The discussion quickly turned heated as farmers and ranchers recounted recent Apache attacks and called for military action. "The savages understand only one language for us," shouted Harold Wilson, who had lost his barn in the recent raid. "What about the peace talks?" asked Samuel Fletcher, the aging shopkeeper. "I heard the army's negotiating with some of the chiefs." "Peace talks," scoffed another man, "while they steal our cattle and burn our homes." Rebecca sat silently, feeling. Najoni pressed closer against her side with each angry outburst. Finally, she could bear it no longer and stood. "Mrs. Morgan," Mayor Thornton acknowledged her with visible discomfort, his eyes flicking to Najoni. "You have something to add?" "I do," Rebecca said, her voice clear and steady. "I understand the fear. I felt it myself. But I wonder if we might remember that there are innocent lives on both sides of this conflict." She gently urged Najoni to stand beside her. "This child harmed no one. Yet she lost everything in this war we're waging. Before we call for more bloodshed, perhaps we should consider who truly suffers for it." Reverend Phillips cleared his throat. "Your Christian charity is commendable, Mrs. Morgan, but surely you of all people should understand the danger." "After what happened to James, my husband," Rebecca interrupted firmly, "would never condone harming children or making them pay for the actions of others. James was a just man." A murmur ran through the crowd. Rebecca felt dozens of eyes upon her, some sympathetic, others hostile. "The Apache girl should be sent to a proper Indian school," called someone from the back. "Learn to be civilized." "Her name is Najoni," Rebecca replied, her voice rising slightly. "And she stays with me until her family can be found." As they left the meeting, Lieutenant Hayes appeared unexpectedly beside her wagon. "Mrs. Morgan," he said quietly, "might I have a word?" Once out of earshot from others, he spoke urgently. "There's a detachment coming through next week. Orders to round up any Apache found off the reservation, including children. They're particularly interested in your ward." Rebecca felt her blood run cold. "Why?" Her father was White Mountain, a war chief who's been leading raids. "They think the child might be useful in negotiations." "As a hostage, you mean?" Rebecca said bitterly. Hayes looked away. "I thought you should know. I won't be with them, but Captain Ridley isn't known for his gentle methods." That night, as Najoni slept, Rebecca sat by the window, watching the moon rise over the distant mountains. The land she had once found so beautiful now seemed filled with menace. Her decision crystallized in the quiet darkness. They would have to leave Dot as she began gathering supplies. Rebecca caught sight of the small box containing James's belongings, his pocket watch, letters, and the simple gold band she had removed from his finger before burial. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. "I'm breaking my promise, James," she whispered to the empty room. "I swore I'd never love again after losing you. But this child—" Her voice caught. "I cannot lose her too." Dawn had barely broken when Rebecca finished loading the wagon. She had worked through the night, packing only what they would need: clothing, food, James's old rifle, and the money she had carefully saved. Najoni watched silently from the porch, her small bundle of belongings clutched to her chest. "We're going on a journey," Rebecca explained gently, kneeling before the child. "To find your people." Najoni's dark eyes studied Rebecca's face. "Together?" "Yes," Rebecca promised. "Together." They set out as the sun crested the horizon, following the old trading route north toward the territories where peaceful bands of Apache were said to have settled. Rebecca had no illusions about the dangers they faced too. Females traveling alone through contested land, but the alternative was unthinkable. By midday, they had left familiar terrain behind. Rebecca kept a watchful eye on the trail, alert for any sign of pursuit from town or encounter with hostile parties. Najoni sat quietly beside her on the wagon seat, occasionally pointing out birds or animals with soft exclamations. Rebecca. The sound of her name made Rebecca pull sharply on the reins. Turning, she saw a rider approaching from behind Lieutenant Hayes, his uniform dusty from hard riding. "What are you doing here?" Rebecca demanded as he drew alongside. "You." "Left without saying goodbye," he replied, his expression grave. Not difficult to guess why. Rebecca tightened her grip on the reins. "Are you here to stop us?" Hayes shook his head. "Captain Ridley's detachment arrived early. They're at your cabin now." He glanced at Najoni. "They won't be pleased to find you gone." "Then why are you here?" Rebecca asked, suspicion edging her voice. "To help," he said simply. "There's a settlement 3 days' ride north, mixed families, some Apache women married to Mexican or white men. You might find sanctuary there while I make inquiries about Najoni's family." Rebecca studied his face, searching for deceit but finding only earnest concern. "Why would you risk your career for us?" Hayes looked away, his jaw tightening. "My mother was Shoshone. I know what happens to children taken from their people." He met her eyes again. "And I know a good heart when I see one, Mrs. Morgan." After a moment's consideration, Rebecca nodded. "Lead the way, Lieutenant." They traveled together through the afternoon, Hayes riding ahead to scout the path. As dusk approached, he led them to a sheltered canyon with a small spring, a place known only to locals and friendly scouts. He explained as Rebecca prepared their simple supper over a small fire. Hayes showed Najoni how to identify edible plants growing nearby. The girl's initial wariness of the soldier had given way to cautious curiosity. "She trusts you," Hayes observed later as they sat by the fire after Najoni had fallen asleep in the wagon. "I'm not sure why," Rebecca admitted. "After everything her people have suffered at the hands of whites." "Children see beyond such things," Hayes said. "They recognize kindness." Rebecca stared into the flames. "I've been thinking about what you said about mixed settlements. Would they truly accept us?" "It won't be easy," Hayes acknowledged. "But frontier people understand survival requires cooperation. Many have formed unconventional families." Something in his tone made Rebecca look up sharply. "What exactly are you suggesting, Lieutenant?" Hayes met her gaze steadily. "Nothing improper, Mrs. Morgan. Only that there are different kinds of families in this territory. Some bound by blood, others by circumstance." The following morning brought clear skies and renewed determination. They continued northward, making good progress until midday when Hayes suddenly raised his hand in warning. "Riders," he said tersely. "Coming fast from the east." Rebecca's heart raced as she squinted against the sun. "Soldiers?" "Apache," Hayes corrected, his expression grim. "War party, 6, maybe 7. What do we do?" Rebecca whispered, instinctively pulling Najoni closer. Hayes made a quick decision. "Follow that ravine. There's a stand of cottonwoods a quarter mile ahead. Hide the wagon there and wait." "Where are you going?" "To talk to them," he said, checking his sidearm. "They'll kill you on sight." Rebecca protested. Hayes smiled faintly. "Not if I use the right words. My mother taught me more than just which plants to eat." Before Rebecca could argue further, he had wheeled his horse around and was riding toward the approaching warriors. Rebecca didn't wait to see what would happen. She snapped the reins and directed the wagon into the ravine, her heart pounding in her ears. Behind her, she heard Hayes call out in a language she didn't understand. Apache words carried on the wind. In the cottonwood grove, Rebecca lifted Najoni from the wagon and led her deep among the trees. "We must be very quiet," she whispered. Though her own breathing seemed thunderously loud, minutes stretched like hours as they waited. Rebecca held James's rifle ready, knowing it would offer little protection against determined warriors. Suddenly, Najoni stiffened beside her. "Someone." "Comies," she whispered. Rebecca raised the rifle, her finger tensing on the trigger as bushes rustled nearby. Then Hayes stepped into view, and relief flooded through her. "It's all right," he said quickly, raising his hands at the sight of the weapon. "They're gone." "What happened?" Rebecca asked, lowering the rifle. "I told them I was searching for a lost child, a chief's daughter separated from her family during a cavalry attack." Hayes knelt before Najoni. "I described you, little one. They didn't know you, but said there's a band camped near Spirit Mountain who lost people in a raid 3 weeks ago." Hope and dread mingled in Rebecca's chest. "How far?" 2 days' ride. "They've given us safe passage." Hayes hesitated. "But Rebecca, if we find her family—" "I know," she said softly. "She goes home." That night, as they camped in the shadow of a mesa, Rebecca found herself watching Najoni as the child slept peacefully. The thought of parting from her caused an almost physical pain. "You've grown attached," Hayes observed, joining her by the fire. "Foolishly so," Rebecca admitted. "I knew from the beginning she wasn't mine to keep." "Yet you risked everything to protect her," Rebecca smiled sadly. "After James died, I thought my heart had died with him. I swore I'd never let myself love again. It hurt too much to lose someone." She gazed at Najoni's sleeping form. "But she called me Mama that first night, and something broke open inside me." Hayes was silent for a long moment. "Love is rarely wise, Mrs. Morgan, but it's the only thing worth risking everything for." As Rebecca met his gaze across the flickering flames, she realized with sudden clarity that he wasn't speaking only of Najoni. Spirit Mountain rose before them, its rugged silhouette cutting against the azure sky. They had traveled in tense silence through the morning, each lost in private thoughts about what awaited them. Najoni had grown increasingly animated, recognizing landmarks and chattering in a mixture of Apache and the English words she had learned. "Home soon," she told Rebecca, pointing eagerly toward the mountain. Rebecca forced a smile, though her heart felt leaden. "Yes, little one, home soon." Hayes rode slightly ahead, alert for any sign of danger or welcome. According to his information, the Apache band they sought had established a temporary camp in a valley beyond the mountain. Those who had survived the cavalry attack that had separated Najoni from her family. "They may not welcome us immediately," Hayes warned as they began the ascent up a narrow trail. "Trust will be hard won." Rebecca nodded, understanding the delicacy of their situation, a white woman and a cavalry officer bringing an Apache child into a community that had every reason to fear and hate them both. As they crested a ridge, the valley came into view. Below, Rebecca could make out the smoke from several campfires and the conical shapes of wickiups scattered among the trees. Her mouth went dry. After weeks of searching, the moment of truth had arrived. Hayes raised his hand in a signal for them to stop. "Wait here," he instructed. "I'll approach first, under a true sign." Rebecca watched anxiously as he rode down toward the encampment, a white cloth tied to his rifle barrel. Several Apache men emerged to meet him, their stance wary but not overtly hostile. "Najoni." Rebecca turned to find the child standing in the wagon, her eyes wide with recognition as she scanned the figures below. Suddenly, Najoni let out a cry that tore through the quiet afternoon, a name, repeated with increasing urgency. Before Rebecca could stop her, Najoni had scrambled from the wagon and was running down the slope, her small legs carrying her with surprising speed toward the gathering below. "Najoni, wait!" Rebecca called, panic rising in her chest. Without thinking, she grabbed James's rifle and hurried after the child, terrified of what might happen if armed warriors misinterpreted the situation. As she reached the edge of the encampment, breathing hard from her descent, Rebecca saw a scene that stopped her in her tracks. Najoni was wrapped in the embrace of a woman who was weeping openly, stroking the child's hair and face as if unable to believe she was real. Her mother, Rebecca whispered, understanding instantly. The resemblance was unmistakable, the same proud bearing, the same expressive eyes. Hayes approached Rebecca cautiously. Her name is Taluta, he explained quietly. She thought Najoni had been killed in the attack or taken to one of the schools. When the soldiers came, she hid her daughter in a narrow cave, promising to return. But by the time she fought her way back, Najoni was gone. Rebecca watched the reunion, tears blurring her vision. The joy on Najoni's face was radiant, confirming what Rebecca had always known in her heart. This was where the child belonged. An older man approached them, his face deeply lined, his bearing dignified despite advanced age. He spoke to Hayes in Apache, his gaze moving between the lieutenant and Rebecca with undisguised curiosity. This is Chief Natani, Hayes translated. Najoni's grandfather. He asks how a white woman came to save his granddaughter. Rebecca hesitated, aware that every eye in the camp was now upon her. Tell him I didn't save her. She saved me. As Hayes translated, the old chief's expression softened slightly. He spoke again, at greater length this time. He says you are welcome to share their fire tonight, Hayes told her. It is their way to honor those who protect children, regardless of blood. That evening, seated by the communal fire, Rebecca listened as Taluta recounted through Hayes's translation the harrowing story of the attack, how their band had been falsely accused of a raid on settlers, how the cavalry had struck without warning, how families had been torn apart in the chaos. Najoni sat between her mother and Rebecca, occasionally reaching out to touch Rebecca's hand as if to reassure herself that both women were truly there. The gesture broke Rebecca's heart anew each time as night deepened. Taluta spoke directly to Rebecca, her words musical in the firelight. She says you have the heart of a mother, Hayes translated. That Najoni told her how you fought to protect her, even against your own people. Rebecca shook her head. Anyone would have done the same. Hayes smiled faintly as he translated Taluta's response. No, not anyone. Later, as the camp settled for the night, Chief Natani approached Rebecca again. This time he carried something. In his weathered hands, a simple bracelet of woven horsehair and beads. A gift, Hayes explained, for the woman who returned his heart to him. Rebecca accepted it reverently. Please tell him I am honored. The chief spoke again, his voice carrying surprising strength for his age. He says you will always have a place at their fire, Hayes translated. That some bonds cannot be broken by distance or difference. That night, lying beneath unfamiliar stars, Rebecca allowed herself to feel the full weight of what tomorrow would bring, parting from the child who had reawakened her capacity to love. The pain was acute, yet different from the hollow grief that had followed James's death. This pain carried with it the warmth of knowing Najoni was where she belonged, surrounded by her people and her history. Dawn brought with it a decision Rebecca hadn't anticipated. As she prepared to say her goodbyes, Taluta approached with Najoni. Through Hayes, she made an unexpected proposal. The band is moving north, away from cavalry patrols, Hayes translated, toward the mixed settlement I mentioned. Taluta asks if you would consider traveling with them. She says ... He paused, seeming to search for the right words. She says Najoni needs both her mothers now. Rebecca stared at them in disbelief. Both? Hayes nodded, his expression gentle. In Apache culture, children often have many mothers, aunts, grandmothers, women of the band who share in raising them. Taluta is offering you a place in their family. Rebecca looked from Hayes to Taluta to Najoni, whose hopeful expression Transcended any language barrier. I don't understand. Why would she trust me after everything my people have done? When Hayes translated her question, Taluta stepped forward and took Rebecca's hands in hers. She spoke softly, her dark eyes filled with an emotion Rebecca recognized immediately, the fierce protective love of a mother. She says that hearts speak louder than history, Hayes translated. That enemies can become family when they share love for a child. Rebecca felt tears spill down her cheeks. Tell her yes, she whispered. Tell her I would be honored. As they prepared to depart together, an unlikely family forged in the crucible of conflict, Rebecca caught Hayes watching her, a question in his eyes. What will you do now, Lieutenant? She asked. He smiled, removing his uniform jacket and folding it carefully. My enlistment ends next month. I thought perhaps I might find work as a translator in a mixed settlement to the north. Rebecca felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun. I hear such settlements welcome people of good heart, regardless of their past. So I've been told, he replied, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer. The necessary dot as they set out together, Apache and white. United by bonds stronger than blood, Rebecca thought of the promise she had made at James's grave. She had sworn never to love again, believing her heart incapable of surviving another loss. Yet here she was, her heart not only surviving but expanding, making room for a child who called her Mama, for a people she had once feared, and perhaps, someday, for a man who understood that love was the only thing worth risking everything for. The morning light caught the simple bracelet on her wrist, its woven strands a fitting symbol of the life she was beginning, separate threads coming together to create something stronger than any could be alone.